This podcast is a conversation by Julie Benetti and Susan Barbaro and is a production of VI Alliance, copyright 2019. And this chart-busting hit, Alone Leave Me, courtesy of New Threads, is available everywhere. Welcome to Lao Tzu's Tao Te Ching, a discussion.
Hey, we'd like to tell everybody that we're sitting here in sunny, beautiful Boston, and we'd like to say hi to all our peeps. We appreciate you listening, and we appreciate all the great feedback that you've given us. Thank you. Keep it coming. We enjoy it, and we hope you're enjoying it.
That's right, because we're having fun doing these discussions as well, and this time we're looking at part 1 and part 2 of Lao Tzu's Tao Te Ching, the Book of Meaning and Life. We're not translating it, we're interpreting it from an energetic standpoint.
We're actually taking one of the translations and we're going to kind of have fun with it and go a little bit deeper and analyze it from a different space, because I don't think we've seen it done anywhere. There's been some beautiful translations. And we started off talking in general about, the translation from Chinese into English. There's so much inflected upon that, as I understand, we started talking about a lot of the Chinese read and write in pictures, which is a beautiful way. And then, of course, in any of the Romance languages as well, in English as well, we have, nouns, and we have verbs, and we, conjugate the verbs. And I think it's a little bit different. So we're trying to look at this and approach it from that standpoint, as looking at it, how it must have been written from in the Chinese scripture. So
right, I kind of look at it as a way of looking backwards. Okay, people have translated it into English, and that's our native language, and so we're looking at it in English, yet the translations focus on words, and we're focused more on the energy. So going back to the pictorial language is very interesting, yet I don't speak Chinese as well. So understanding the symbols and how they're interpreted kind of from a brain language type of way is interesting as well. And in that sense, you get pictures and it forms conversation and an energy and a vibration rather than just a terminology in the language.
So that's what we're really going to try to do. As I did this, look certain words and I try to imagine the picture and maybe going from that point forward.
Right.
And we're not reading the individual passages. I call them stanzas. I don't know what they're called. I know they're not called stanzas, but that's how I refer to them. We're going to just, talk about it. We're as expert as anybody else out there is. We don't translate Chinese. We don't have that skill. Yet we can look at this and, it's anyone's guess. This has been translated so many times. Who knows how truthful it was to how it was said.
And so the process is there are 81, as you call them, stanzas. And what we did is, since 9 times 9 is 81.
Yep.
We are going to look at 9 at a time and just discuss them as quick and as efficiently, effectively, and as fun as we can, and then just keep on moving.
Okay, so let's go to number 1.
Okay.
So what I find interesting is the first 2 lines, the Tao that can be expressed is not the eternal Tao. And I think just, talking about what Tao really is, people say the way, and I just think it's interesting because when I looked up one definition, it's the absolute principle underlying the universe, combining within itself the principles of yin and yang and signifying the way or code of behavior that is in harmony with the natural order. And so even they talk about the Tao, it talks about being in harmony, it talks about yin and yang, and that's all combined with an even a deeper principle.
And the funny thing, especially with this first part, is that no expression can catch all of it. It's everything and anything is just expressed often as just the way. And so it can be every element, every feeling, everything. And in its non-expression is how it exists, which is cool and yet ironic as well. And I think this first one is great because it basically shares the importance that names are almost like placeholders. And whether it be a description, a feeling, or anything, they're kind of like placeholders, and it's how we understand and interpret stuff. The non-existence part and the non-expression part is where the Tao comes in, where it just encompasses all. And I think getting back to what you said about this first stanza just kind of shares like how to talk about it. And I think it shares how to look at the Tao, and yet, how do you express it when you can't really use words?
So what do you think is how to look at the Tao? What did you come up with in your interpretation?
Well, to me, it's ever present, it's all around, but when you go to pinpoint it, then you've lost it. So this is horrible. It's not the right expression, but it's like a fleeting moment. It's kind of it's the space between the inhale and the exhale, and you can't grasp it. Yet the minute you try to grasp it, you've lost it. And I think to share also, you've been reading Dante, and how Dante expresses, hey, a rose is a rose, but that's really not the true substance of the expression of what a rose is. Mm. And I think that's very valuable in that sense, because once you express it, you've set limitations to it.
So you're thinking that this is also saying that at some point you have to just move beyond. You have to just accept that you can't fully understand it. I mean, it's a level of you just can't understand it. That's part of this when it says, non-existence is the beginning of heaven and earth. Existence is the mother of individual beings. Therefore, does the direction towards non-existence lead to the miraculous essence? And if you look towards existence, you have limitations. So if you look towards existence, where we are, we have limitations. If we look the other way, there's no limitations, yet you can get lost.
Right, because I think the moment you try to understand it, you place it into concepts and you start to give it determinators and you give it limitations, and that's not the expression of Tao.
Okay, let's go to the second one.
Okay, we're looking at the second one now, and in the second one, in describing something, I think it shares that you inadvertently share a description with the opposite. You give life to the opposite. So this one exemplifies that the minute you're, limiting something with a description or a title or a placeholder, you've already created its opposite. And, what generates from that is existence and not non-existence, which is Tao.
Because when I read this stuff, I always kind of interpret it into what I can understand in a very simplified manner. Because if I go too deep, then you're right, I can get myself lost. So I look at this as energy is just energy. Energy is not good or bad. Energy is just energy. It's not until it gets interpreted that it becomes good or bad. It becomes, as it says, long or short, high or deep, before or after, good, bad. And so that's how I interpret it. Go ahead.
So that's a really clear and valuable insight to it. And it's also so simple that it's very deep. And yet it helps you understand the second part when he talks about the man of calling, because in the man of calling, he's saying that the man of calling can use that understanding to his advantage.
So in this stanza, it says, the very end, when the work is done, he, meaning the man of calling, does not dwell with it. And just because he does not dwell, he remains undeserted. And I had to really think about that line. And the only way I can understand it better, because there's double negatives, is I got to turn it around. So if I flip it and I said, and just because he dwells, he remains deserted. Those are both, that changes double negatives to double positives. So then I can understand if he dwells with where he is, he's deserted. That's the only way that I could grasp that.
That's funny because you're actually doing what the stanza tells you to do. So you're basically, to me, my understanding is it's how to be in Tao. And so how do you be in Tao? How do you be in the way? Because you don't dwell in any pair of opposites. So you're completely in Tao. Once again, it's the space between. So you're lacking, to me, undeserted is lacking nothing.
Right. And so, a lot of this is if you don't dwell, people can ask, how do you live that way? You don't have any feeling? If you don't have love, you don't have hate. If you don't have opposites, how do you live? And I think the key to this is not that you don't experience the opposites. You just don't get caught in them. If you want to love, you want to go outside and it's beautiful out today. I want to go out and feel the sun. I want to enjoy it. Well, does that mean that because I create the enjoyment of the sun, I have to not enjoy the rain or the snow or the cold? And we all know we had a crazy winter here.
Well, it's kind of like you're talking about enjoying like the middle way, so you don't go too far on either side of feeling the extent and the overwhelming extreme of something. So
I read this as yes to what you're saying, that you choose how far you want to experience the high and the low, or the good or the bad, because within that there are lessons. It's not going to exist unless the opposite exists. And so I think a lot of it is you still can live in that world, but if you understand one exists because the opposite exists, you can minimize it.
Okay, moving to 3. Number 3. I just feel like it's complete sarcasm. You don't prefer all these things, and it's almost like saying, if you have virtues, if you don't prefer these things, you limit the vices, quarreling doesn't happen, stealing, things like that. Those are just generalities. Yet it's almost like how to be with others in Tao.
So the second part, when it talks about the man of calling, we're reading the Richard Wilhelm translation. But, the man of calling, that's an interesting description for him to choose for.
Yeah, because I kind of thought maybe he could be saying it's a monk, but a lot of times I think it changes in each one.
I look at it as the man of calling, to me, is the chosen one, the one who goes in, and not the chosen one as if, some God came and says, La, you are the chosen one. It's the one who's chosen to follow. It's actually the reverse. But, he empties their hearts and fills their bellies. He weakens the will and strengthens their bones. And it goes on, and he says he takes care in that those who know dare not act. And he does the non-doing, and thus everything falls into place. And I look at that as what you're saying. I agree. And I even go to one step further is it doesn't matter what you do. Certain things are going to occur. You're going to be born one day, you're going to die one day. Those are givens. And what you do in between is your choice. And you can make that, today you're going to do this, you're going to meet somebody, you're going to get this job, all those things, you're going to get a car, all those things are points, and they're going to occur. And whether you do anything about it or you do not, but the difference is how easy are you going to make it? How much fun are you going to make it? Are you going to make it work? You have a choice as to, from point A to point B, what's going to occur, but certain things are set up, and if you do nothing, those things are going to occur.
And so to me, it's a testament of going with the flow.
Yeah.
Really just going with the flow, and by not doing, by not fixing, by not being involved, by not creating problems, you just understand all goes as it goes. Exactly what you said. It's going to go as it goes, and you go with the flow.
But I think this doesn't mean we sit in the couch and you have bonbons. I think what it means is you still do what you're going to do. We're doing these podcasts because we know we go further into each one of these and we understand it better. And that's why we do it. We're not doing this because this is our goal and this is our lot in life. We're doing it because we enjoy doing it and we enjoy sharing it. And what occurs, we have no idea. Nothing can occur. A million things could occur. It doesn't matter. We're doing what we enjoy doing.
And we're going with the flow as we do it to figure out how we're going to do it. So
there you go.
4.
Yep.
Okay, we move on to 4, and I love 4 because it's like a beautiful description of Tao existing. It's just a beautiful description of how it moves and it exists perfectly, and with it, there's no strictness, no puzzlements, there's no lack of clarity, and it just comes from an element of all of us. It has layers, yet it's right in front of us, and it's always around us.
When I looked at the word abyss, which is in here, it talks about the Tao, about flowing, and it says it is an abyss, like the ancestor of all things. When I looked up, again, abyss, it's intellectual and moral depths. It can also just be an immeasurable deep gulf or great space. A bottomless gulf pit. What you could say, cosmologists would say like a black hole. It's just something that you can't get your arms around. It's like the depths of like something we can't even fathom.
And it's interesting symbolically to me in this, because it unites it, compares it like the ancestor of all things, which is amazing. It's like it's the vessel, but it's also what's inside.
It says that it's a little bit of everything. I do not know whose son it is. It seems to be earlier than God.
And you know what's funny? What it reminded me of, which is going to come up in another future stanza, is it's almost like water. It's in all its states, solid, liquid, gas, steam. That's what it is. On to the 5th one.
This one is interesting because the second line in the first 4 verses is the same. But to them and then to him, men are like straw dogs destined for sacrifice. I didn't know what straw dogs was. I looked it up. It has to do with the Chinese ceremony in which they take straws and they put it in the shape of a dog and they use it for the ceremony. When it talks about the earth and men being benevolent, it's really like, no. What they do is they take these straw, they call them straw dogs. They use them, they make them because they need them in the ceremony. When the ceremony is over, they just throw them out. Because it's saying that, it's not that heaven and earth are benevolent. The man of calling is not benevolent. They just make what they need and they work with it, which to me, and this is just my interpretation, is it goes right back to, energy is just energy. There's no good, heaven and earth are good and they created us. And, well, when something happens and we die, it's bad. I take it as, no, it's just, it was made, it was created. It's like, you're hungry, you want something to eat, go over and make something. Is it because you're good? It's no, because you're hungry, you make it, and that's what you use it. You want some mead, you make the mead, you drink the mead, you enjoy the mead, and then when it's done, it's over. So I had to look up straw dogs because that bothered me. I couldn't figure out what that meant. And then I started looking at it. They like straw dogs destined for sacrifice.
Disposable. Yeah.
They're disposable. And not because they're bad. They don't make them because they're good. And they don't dispose of them because they're bad. They just use them. And when they're done, it's done.
And when he talks about the space between heaven and earth is like a flute, empty, and yet it does not collapse. When moved, more and more emerges from it. That's like an amazing pictorial description. I mean, it's almost, once again, it's the space between. What's the space between inhaling and exhaling? And, you play, if you play that space between, because you play a flute and a song emerges. And, the flute seems empty, but look what comes from it. And if you look at a flute, I mean, it has the reed, and then inside it's empty. Yet still, it seems empty, but it's vast, and it's present, and it's there. And it's funny because the last part where many words exhaust themselves on it, it is better to guard the within. I really got that, it's useless to talk about it. And yet here we are talking about it. We're talking more about the energy, not trying to say this is Tao.
No.
And the within space, is once again, I keep going to that. What is the space between the inhale and the exhale? And between that is just being present in that space, and that's, you can't really discuss
so that what's important though is, like you said, we're discussing the energy, and the idea is that we can talk, about physical. You have biology, we can look at trees, we can look at bugs, you have arborists, you have entomologists, you have doctors, you have biologists, you have everything that can handle what we consider the physical. But going into the Tao, you can't use any of those measurement tools. So what we're doing is we're looking at the energy of it, because that's the closest as we can get to what we think of as the Tao, is the energy, the peace that is within all of everything. And that's what's important here. Like you said, we're not going to talk about what's consisted of everything, because we can't. But we can talk about energy because we can feel it. You can understand it. You can move with it. And, of course, the more you do it, the more you get.
And the funny thing is, when you're talking about energy, you're expressing it in an energized way. And that's what comes across more, in a pictorial representation, however you want to visualize it or think about it or feel it or sense it, than the words themselves. Because, we all did those little tests where you can say a word a certain way and what occurs when you say a word a certain way. There's a different inflection to it, so that makes it different. Yet there's an energy in this conversation. And, again, that's why we're sharing it.
So and I think the last line, it is better to guard the within. I think what that means is to guard your thoughts and your beliefs and where you go in terms of what we even spoke about before, about the good and the bad, the high and the low, is to what you experience is what you want to experience. So the guard, it is better to guard the within, is to really have more, the word is control over your mind and your beliefs and your thoughts.
And so we're moving into number 6, and I just like to take a second because I found some kind of a pattern here. And so the first one, you're talking about Tao. The second one, what others do around Tao and how to be in it. And the third one, how to be with others in Tao. This is what it seems to me. The fourth one gives a beautiful description of Tao existing. The fifth one is how you experience it and be in it in relation to our environment. And then I look at number 6 and I'm like, wow, this is birth. This is amazing. This is such an incredible pictification of birth.
So it's interesting because I looked up Spirit of the Valley, and Spirit, of course, they've got tons of different descriptions. but it's the immaterial, intelligent, or sentient part of a person or its soul. Julie and I actually sat down and we read these separate and took notes separately, and then we sat down and we said, all right, we're going to talk on the podcast. So we didn't coordinate any of this. And then, of course, the valley was, once again, the depth. The valley is the deepest part of, whether it's two hills, two mountains, it's the depth.
And always the valley, when you see a picture of a valley, and is it lush and green and fertile? I mean, there you go, right there. And then once again, it is called the female.
Right.
And then when he goes into the gateway of the dark female is called the root of heaven and earth. There you are in the space between. And it's like the gateway, even in different ideologies and tantra and everything. I mean, it seems like that's like the reproductive system right there. I'm even going to go further, because then it goes uninterrupted, as though persistent. It is effective without effort, which is funny because it's always there, regardless of use or not. I mean, there's always a cycle. There's always a cycle of life. And without effort, it's almost a testament to Mother Nature.
Got that. That's awesome.
I mean, I just found that really amazingly beautiful.
Cool. I mean, the other definition of valley, which supports, I'm supporting you, Julie, all the way. It says the place of meeting of two slopes of a roof that form on the plan of re-entrant angle. I mean, it all just supports what you're saying. And I think, again, if we think of this as being pictures, like anyone, I hear a word and I have a vision in my mind. And I have my own description. But if I go to a separate description other than my own, well, other things open up to me.
Right.
And that's why I do it.
And the cool part about this one is going into 7. I think 7 gives a view of self, which makes sense because there's birth and then you get a view of self. And when 7 starts out, saying heaven is eternal and earth lasting, they're lasting and eternal because they do not live for themselves. Therefore, can they live forever? There's a vibration to it. Almost, if you don't live for yourself, you live forever. What does that really mean?
Well, I just think part of it is what's the live forever? I mean, as a human being, you say, yeah, I want to live forever. But as a sentient being and a soul, I guess the idea, too, is that you're here living to learn lessons. And to grow, the ultimate is that you learn your lessons and you move on to a higher existence.
Well, it's so funny because then when he pairs it with the man of calling and says, okay, and it's almost like the man of calling doesn't care about how others name him or see his self. He is just awareness of himself, and he is aware of who his self is. That sounds like odd English, and he can do what he wants and share because he's free in the space of Tao, and in desiring nothing, he's completely complete because of that. He has it all.
And what's interesting is it says heaven and earth is eternal. Heaven is eternal. Is earth eternal? NASA researches and all these amazing, astrophysicists, and they're out there and they're saying earth is not eternal. Earth is going to last for a period of time. So, you got to wonder, was the word earth used yet?
Well, it's interesting because there also is an interesting way, and I'd love to see it in symbols, of how he pairs that first and second sentence. Heaven is eternal and earth lasting. They are lasting and eternal. So by grouping them together, he makes them a little of both. So that's a little play almost on yin-yang and what goes into what, and are they paired?
So then it would make you question earth. I mean, we know that earth is really a molten ball of lava, and, and it gets colder as it goes further out. And the question becomes, I mean, and again, we've heard that earth is not everlasting. Yet, what would that represent? So you could almost go, the earth has its own soul, and that is everlasting. You have heaven, you look at it a little bit different as a person.
And there you go, a view of self.
Right.
It's very interesting. And then you compare it with the man of calling.
I look at this when I read this, and this is my interpretation. Heaven is more, again, yang, and earth is yin, but that's also in acupuncture. Yet heaven is your spirit and earth is your earthly body. They can live forever, but it's something more than that.
Well, again, when you go to view of self, are you gonna pocket it to the description and expression of the physical, or are you gonna go to energy?
And that's what I think I'm trying to say.
And again, you're pictifying exactly what he's expressing, which is cool because you hit the nail on the head. But you could be wrapped in that cycle.
You go to the idea of a physical existence.
Right.
Yet the earth yes, it is physical, but for it to be everlasting, it's got to be more than just this ball of molten lava, the rock on the surface, and it goes in. It's not.
Well, because once you termed it, then it became limited.
Right.
Moving into 8, to me, 8 is all about nature. Of course, there's water. And, it's funny. I think the comparison exists with Tao that you can find it everywhere. And it's good, it's strong, it's present. To me, the benevolence is that more of a presence. It's just there. It reaches in the depths of thoughts. It's chaos to order. There's a flow. It's just water. The existence of water in all its different states and how it's expressed is the epitome of just the description of Tao, yet there is no description of Tao.
So one of the descriptions that I got of benevolence was a gift, the greatest gift. And if I put in greatest gift for the word benevolence, the highest, greatest gift is like water. The greatest gift of water is to benefit all beings without strife. It dwells in places which man despises. Therefore, it stands close to Tao. And I think about it, it's like water. I couldn't even get beyond that because I think that's so cool. It dwells in places which man despises. Therefore, it stands close to Tao. I mean, you think of water. Water goes everywhere. It goes in war-ravaged places. It goes everywhere in the world beyond our world. It's we're finding it now in space, and it goes places where men dare not tread in some situations, and yet it still goes there because there's no space, there's no spot that is not closest to the Tao.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
So what about this last line? He who does not assert himself thereby remains free of blame. I mean, to me, if I just read it as it is, it looks like a weasel clause. So if you don't say anything, then you're always never to blame.
And I don't know, if you stay present and you go with the flow, and I mean, is there an assertion to that? If you're going with the flow, are you really asserting yourself that you're going with the flow?
So it has to do with that greatest gift.
It also makes me feel an energy of, you get out of your own way. I mean, it takes more than just the physical self, and the assert to me is the powerful word here, and it's not the blame, but the assert part is the powerful word. You can't really say, okay, today I'm going with the flow. You can feel it, and you can sense it, and you can move with that, but you can't really, can you really assert yourself that you're doing that? And if something happens, then don't you start to question, well, is that going with the flow, or wait a minute?
The energy's there.
Right.
And the energy's working in all of these places. Therefore, for someone to step in and assert themselves, they're going to, I hate to say it, you either prolong it, screw it up. You're never going to quit. You're never going to make it go faster.
Right.
It's going to go on its own accord.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's also the statement of, he doesn't have to be a fully functioning, hey, here I am, it's me. Because that's not what the man of calling is. He knows it's, that energy is in that space, and it's in that time, and
so
it's in that presence.
So the benevolence is also another word for energy, which would be the highest benevolence, which is the highest gift. It's like water. It exists everywhere. In movement, benevolence shows itself in timing. And so I thought timing, that's why most people assert themselves, because they're trying to fix something, they're trying to move something, they're trying to hinder something, they're trying to work through something, whatever it is, because they're in a timing issue. They're trying to make something occur. And the blame is about you're interfering in something you should not interfere.
Right.
Stay out of it. It works itself out. And the only difference between it being worked out and where somebody might interfere is a timing issue, because I want it fixed today. Right. I mean, we all want it. I want everything fixed today.
Where I go with time. Time is man-made.
So to support that is the last thing he says is timing. And then from timing, he goes right into that statement. So that would make sense. If energy shows itself in love, it's speech, energy shows itself in truth. In ruling, energy shows itself in order. Energy shows itself in everything. So if you assert yourself, you're just trying to deal with time and energy.
And you're getting in the way.
And Tao doesn't deal with time because everything exists at once.
And it's all present. It's ever present.
Yep.
Right.
All right, let's go to 9.
And so 9 to me is just wholly about virtues. I mean, to hold on to something and thereby make it overflow, this is not worthwhile. To me, that's greed. And what occurs is you have too much. Why would you want too much? And then when he goes on further, it's almost like to make use of something and still keep it sharp, you can't keep that up for long. And to me, that's almost like, you abuse something, you get exhausted. I mean, there's exhaustion all around.
The last two lines. When the work is done, it is time to withdraw. This is the Tao of heaven. When the work is done, it's time to withdraw. You don't hold anything. You don't go beyond. You follow it. It's got a lot to do with balance. And you just move with it, and everything works out. And when you get to a certain point, you don't like, okay, this is mine. I got it.
Right. And when the work is done, you go. When it's time to go, you go, and you know that because if you're in the Tao, you know that. You go with the flow, you move with it. You know it's time to go. You're done.
Cool. I think we're done.
Okay, so join us. We're going to work on putting together something in writing too, as well, to share some of these points as we go through. So the next one will be from 10 on.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for listening to this production from EI Alliance. Check out our Amazon authors pages for books and podcasts. Find New Threads music and their latest album on iTunes, Spotify, and newthreads.us.